Hello friends, I'm Rosa, welcome to the channel. So today we are gonna be talking about witchy books. I actually really wanted to record a video like this last year, but I was kind of scared to talk about books that I hadn't read yet, so I decided not to. However, this year we are going to be talking about some witchy books that I've not read yet. So I have about 9 physical books, so like books that I own. I have 2 on Kindle that I have not read yet as well that I want to talk about. I have 3 that are on their way to me right now that have not arrived yet. There's a couple as well that I don't have but that I really want. And I think there's also one more that's not been released yet but will be released next year that I want to talk about. So we have a fair amount, we have like a good amount of books to talk about today. So when I started going through all my books and also like books that I want to read to figure out which ones actually would be considered witchy or like which characters would be considered witches in them and stuff, it dawned on me that it's very different from book to book, because in some situations, they're just humans with magical powers. So like they just have them. Maybe they've inherited them through generations, but they just have them in one way or another. In other situations, it's very like they do magic through rituals, and then in other situations, they have some kind of connection to nature. I thought it was very interesting to see how it differs from book to book. So like some of these, actually not my physical copies, maybe with the exception of one, might just be me interpreting them as being witches, but they've not necessarily gotten the term given to them in the book. But a lot of them, they're also literally called witches in the book. I know that as soon as there is witch in the title, I'm good. But like something like A Deadly Education, I kind of want to call them witches, but at the same time, I don't know if that's actually correct. It's very up for interpretation. I did not include that book in this video, by the way, just I had to pass up on some of them. But anyway, it's like kind of funny. So I wanted to ask you guys as well, like, what do you consider witches in your books? Do you only consider the ones that have been given the label witch a witch? Or if you got another opinion, let me know, because I'm kind of curious. So before we get fully started, I just want to quickly say that all the books that I'm going to talk about today will be linked in the description box to both Book Depository but also US Amazon. They are affiliate links, which means that if you purchase anything after clicking on the link, I do make a small commission. But if you just want to know a little bit more about the books, you can just click the link and read the synopses. You don't have to buy anything. So it's a good way to get a little bit more information about the book if you don't understand what I'm saying, which I will not blame you for. But now, let's get started with the first one, which is Truthwitch by Susan Dennard, who's actually coming out with a new book here very, very soon called The Luminaries, which I'm super excited for. I have not read this one yet though. But I love the whole like every book has its own witch name. So the first one is Truthwitch. I think there's a Wind Witch, a Thread Witch. They're all born with like powers that have some different kind of focus. So our lead girl can tell, she has the power to be able to tell if you are lying, which is a very, very sought after power in this kingdom that she lives in. And it's very dangerous to be a truth witch because people will literally do anything to get their hands on a truth witch for their own benefit, of course. As in, they will literally kill other people to get their hands on a truth witch. So our lead girl is hiding her ability because she knows that it's not safe for her if it's just like out there. We also have a Thread Witch in this book, and I'm not entirely sure how that works, but it's something about seeing like ties and stuff between things, and our Thread Witch and our Truth Witch are very good friends despite being from completely different backgrounds. They often go out on adventures, get in trouble, and you know, all the stuff, and kind of just want to be able to live their own lives. Sophia, who is our lead character, is also a noble, so there are certain expectations of her and stuff. But meanwhile, there's a war looming over this kingdom or emperordom that they live in. I'm not really sure what we're gonna go with the world that they live in. And with the help from a prince who is a wind witch, and also there's a blood witch involved, I think in a not necessarily very positive way, like she might be a little bit of a troublemaker herself as well, or at least causing trouble for our lead characters. They go out on another adventure and have to fight various things. And that's all I've gathered from this book. I've mentioned this before, but I love this whole like, this person has this kind of magic, this person has this kind of magic, which was obviously why I was drawn very much towards this. I don't know what it is. I'm just a sucker for stuff like that apparently. Like, I don't know. I don't know why. I cannot explain to you why, but that's just how it is. So I'm very excited to be reading this along with the others and see exactly how the world is, because I've heard the world is quite good. Can't wait to get their powers explained to me as well, although the truth or not is kind of obvious, but I want to know what a Threadwitch is and also what a Witch does. The Blood Witch I'm kind of assuming has something to do with blood magic, but we will see. This is a young adult fantasy with magic, but I think that's a given. All the books we're talking about today have magic. So the next book is about an author who definitely, I think, will be continuing writing books about witches, because their first one was also about a witch. This is Wildest the Witch by Rachel Griffin. The other book is The Nature of Witches, which I loved, by the way. It was a great book, can highly recommend. But in this one, we follow our lead girl, whose name is Iris. Her name is Iris. And Iris is a witch, of course. She's been keeping her powers secret for a while because she had, unfortunately, a night where it kind of turned a little bit. I think something might have happened to someone, so she's just been suppressing her powers since. Doesn't want to hurt anybody, just wants to do her own thing. Even though she's fully aware that the Witches' Council is aware that she exists, she's just gonna not. So she spends her evening writing curses that she's never gonna cast on anyone. But I suppose that she gets a lot of, like, that's her cozy hobby or something, writing curses, you know. It's very casual. So while she writes her curses at night, during the daytime, she works at a wildlife refuge alongside a guy called Pike, who hates witches. Pike and Iris don't get along very well, and after Pike manages to piss off our dear girl Iris, she actually intends to cast a curse on him, but before she manages to cast it, so she's written it down, she's gotten it ready, has not cast it yet, it gets stolen by an owl. Snapped out of her hands, just straight up stolen by an owl, who flies off with this curse. And unfortunately, it turns out that this owl is actually an amplifier, which means that if something happens and it triggers this curse, it'll be cast on so many more people than just Pike, who it was originally intended for. So Iris finds herself in a bit of a situation and has to work alongside with Pike to get this curse back before it's cast on anyone. So this is a young adult contemporary fantasy. Oh, you can literally see the owl up here. I never noticed until now. It's kind of funny. It's a stunning cover as well. I love the colors on this cover. And I think this is one of those instances where witches have a little bit more to do with nature as well. I'm so excited for this because I loved The Nature of Witches. It was beautiful, so I'm gonna be having a good time with this. Also because we have a little bit of a haters to lovers situation. So it's gonna be a good time, I'm pretty sure. Next up, we have a male witch, a bruja, and that is Cemetery Boys, or Yadriel from Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. In this book, we follow Yadriel, who wants to prove himself as a male witch, a bruja. So with the help of one of his cousins, he makes a ritual to summon his dead cousin because he wants to help. I'm assuming he wants to help, like, sort out what happened to his cousin and help him pass on, if you will. Move on? I think I just combined two different... It's fine, move on from being a ghost. Important note, his dead cousin was murdered, by the way. So, like, there's a whole thing going on there. He really wants to help his cousin, whose name is Miguel. Unfortunately, as it turns out, Yadriel ends up summoning the wrong ghost. He ends up summoning Julian, who is also dead, which I feel like I shouldn't have to say. Why did I say that? Anyway, Julian is the school's bad boy and maybe has a little bit of an attitude. It's not super helpful. And once he's summoned, he's basically like, well, I got some stuff I need to take care of, so I can't help you with this Miguel business. I need to just figure out what I want to do before I, move on. So Yadriel finds himself in a little bit of an issue there because now he's stuck with Julian, who kind of just want to do his own thing, sort out his own stuff, and Yadriel has to help. And then as they, sort out Julian's business, it turns out the more time they spent together, the less Julian actually wants to say goodbye to Yadriel. So there's a bit of a situation there, and I've heard that this is a very beautiful book, so I'm very excited. But I thought it was cool that I could find a male witch. A bruja. I think that's how you pronounce it, but I have no high Spanish, so I'm probably butchering the pronunciation. I tried. Next up, we have a book, which is actually also, it's got to do with Norse mythology, and that is The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichek. Chech. I don't actually know how to pronounce their last name, but this is about, and I've learned how to pronounce her name now, Angreboda. Angreboda. I'm very proud. As I'm Norse, by the way. I'm Danish, but we would not pronounce it like that. However, her name is like very old, so I don't want to get into explanations. But Angreboda is the wife of Loki, and also the mother of the, what do you call that in English? Fenrir wolf? The big wolf? You know the wolf? The wolf from Norse mythology? That wolf? I'm sure if you know anything about Norse mythology, it's a very important wolf. You would know. There's also a snake, and then there's, is it another wolf or a dog or something? But she's the mother of these 3 monsters, essentially. Loki is the father. So knowing that, and also knowing that she has not had the best of relationship to the Norse gods, I'm excited to see where this goes, because it's supposed to be a retelling of her story, and there's not a whole lot known about Angreboda. So it's not much of a synopsis, like a summary of it, but I'm also trying not to know too much about the book before going into it. I want to be surprised a little bit. I've heard there's some good banter between Angreboda and Loki though, so I'm excited for that. But also to get to, at least in some way, know a Norse mythology character a little bit better, one that I don't necessarily know a lot about. So then we have an adult, what I think is also a contemporary fantasy. It's Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juna Dawson. In this book we follow 4 girls, 4 women, who are childhood friends. They're all witches, and they've all joined this secret government group that is called Her Majesty's Royal Coven. But as the book starts, they're kind of all in their own spot. Like, they've moved on a little bit from this witchy business, except from one of them is running this organization and one of them is kind of trying to get out of it to start her own little thing. The other 2 are doing something completely else. But there's a threat looming over them because there's a warlock who has been captured by people who are not supposed to know about Her Majesty's Royal Coven, who is basically threatening to out them all. And so our lead, or one of our lead women at least, chooses to connect with her old friends again to try and get help. And there's something about a prophecy, which I can't fit into it all, but there's something about a prophecy. So it's about 4 women reconnecting, 4 women who happen to be witches and do witchy things. But it's about them reconnecting to basically save this organization, keep the witches secret and safe. Meanwhile, there's this threat of this prophecy looming over them the entire time. So it's also the first in a series as far as I know. When it came out, I thought it was going to be a standalone. It still scares me a little bit because it's so colorful, but like, she's gonna stand out for the rest of the video. We're just gonna have to deal with it. It's a lot, I know, but I have this feeling that this book has a lot of like good humor in it. So, and just as a note, because I know that you're not necessarily, like, you wouldn't necessarily know this unless you're from the UK or you've lived in the UK, but Her Majesty's Royal Coven, the first letters are HMRC, which stands for, oh, I forgot what the H and the M are for, but it's Revenue and Customs, I think. What is it? Oh gosh, I forgot what it is. Oh, HM is literally His Majesty's. I just looked it up, but yeah, it's basically, it stands for His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, which I think is so funny. I had to deal with them a lot when I lived in the UK because I paid taxes through them. I was self-employed, so it was a whole thing for a while. So when I look at it, I'm like, oh, HMRC. Dang, I don't want to HMRC, no. But yeah, it's inside joke with UK people, I suppose. Or people who just are aware of HMRC. So next one we're going to be talking about is The Black Witch by Laurie Forrest. So this is one of those books that has to do with a little bit more of like ancestral connections. We follow our lead girl, who is the descendant of the last prophesized Black Witch. I believe it's her grandmother, but unfortunately our lead girl, despite being the last descendant of this prophesized Black Witch who's like super powerful, our lead girl does not have any powers. And for someone who lives in a society where she's supposed to be this like super powerful witch because her ancestor was super powerful, it's hard for her because she doesn't have any powers. So when she gets the chance to go away to somewhere else and live out her dreams of being an apothecary, she takes the chance and ends up at this school. I think it's supposed to be a school. Not entirely sure, but I think it's supposed to be a school. Where unfortunately, some of her family's biggest enemies also attend. And because of that, it turns out to be a very, very dangerous place for her. And so while she's at the school, she's feeling the pressure of not living up to her heritage. Everything she knows will be put into question, and our lead girl kind of has to start thinking that maybe she actually has to trust those people that she's supposed to fear. I know that sounds super vague, but I've heard many lovely things about the book. And even though I think the last ones were not super well received, I'm still super excited to be reading this at some point, so I think it'll be a good time. Next up, we have a bit more of like an urban contemporary fantasy, also a mystery. It is Our Crooked Hearts by Melissa Albert. So this is actually told from two points of views. We have a daughter and a mother. It's told from the daughter like right now, and then the mother when she was 16 or 17. The daughter is unaware that her mother is actually in possession of very witchy powers. She's also, I think, unaware that she herself might actually possess these same powers. But one night a stranger appears in the middle of the road as she's, I'm assuming, going home, but I don't really know. He just appears in the middle of the road. It's a thing. And after this appearance, strange things start to happen. And we're talking like witchy things that our lead girl, the daughter, is finding very, very weird. She's also having flashbacks of like memories that she's not supposed to have. And this leads her to question if there might be more to her mother than she was aware of, which there is because her mother is a witch. She just doesn't know, but we know. And as for her mother's timeline, we get to discover how she gets her powers and what her and her friends are up to, which might have consequences for the daughter in the future, by the way. So at some point, their timelines may not overlap, but there might be a conclusion, like consequences. As for her mother's timeline, it's about her basically learning about her powers, training them, but also the various things that she's doing with her friends, which might come back and actually have consequences in the now for her daughter. So I think there's a bit of a mystery to this book. I'm not sure where it comes in, but I'm excited to see. So we have a little bit more of like a modern fantasy. I mean, it's a contemporary fantasy, just like Her Majesty's Royal Coven, but I do like the mother-daughter aspect to it. So next up, we have Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reid, which is a retelling of the Juniper Tree, which I've not read, so I know nothing about it whatsoever. But in this book, we follow Marlinchin and her two sisters, and they're witches, but they're not like, they do work as witches, but like during the day, but it's like touristy witches, so they sell remedies and stuff. They don't do magic for a living. So while they do this a day, at home they have to deal with their father, who is basically an evil being. And at night, the sisters go out into the city and enjoy everything it has to offer, including visiting the ballet theater, which is one of their favorite things to do. And our lead girl, Marlinchin, actually ends up kind of catching the eye of one of the dancers, who she ends up having a little bit of a relationship. As this relationship is evolving from something like a fling to something a little bit more, her father's behavior at home gets worse and worse, both when it comes to his rage, but also his power, his magic. He has magic himself. And at the same time as well, there is this thing threatening the city. So our lead girl, Marlinchin, finds herself kind of caught in the middle of all of that and has to use her powers to keep the city safe. And I am very excited to be reading this, so I know exactly what's going on with all the little motifs here on the cover, but I'm kind of thinking it doesn't necessarily have a good ending because there's a heart with a dagger in it, which is making me nervous. And yeah. This is supposed to be a little bit gothic, definitely adult. Did I say a little bit gothic? How is something a little bit gothic? You know, just like a smudge of gothic. You can't see it if I place it right there. But also supposed to be a little bit of a dark fairy tale, so I'm looking forward to it. And then we got one more book, which is actually one that I'm interpreting as being a witchy book myself. I have made this decision to include it. So that is Circe by Madeline Miller. The reason being that Circe was considered the first witch in Greek mythology. So I was just, when I was writing the list over the books that I wanted to include in this video, it was I was drawn to it all the time, so I decided to include it, even though it's definitely a bit of an interpretation. So I think some people wouldn't necessarily call Circe herself a witch. I personally will, but This does actually include witchcraft that Circe does dabble in, so we're including her. Plus Greek mythology, it's nice to have that represented in the video as well. But as for Circe, she is the daughter of the mightiest titan of all the titans, and that is Helios, who has something to do with the sun. I forgot. What is it? God of the sun, mightiest of the titans. Yeah, she's the daughter of Helios. But despite being the daughter of the mightiest of titans, Circe is actually not loved by her people. So she runs off and goes to the humans instead, where she both learns about them but also enjoys their companionship, but also starts to dabble in witchcraft. The thing is, though, that witchcraft is forbidden by the gods, and after Circe performs a spell, she is banned by Zeus to this land that is called Ayaya, I think. What did it say on the... Yeah, Ayaya it says on the map. You can see it right here. While spending time at Ayaya, Circe gets better at her witchcraft, but she also comes across people like, or not people, I wouldn't call Hermes a people, but Hermes visits Ayaya at some point. Odysseus? I don't know how to pronounce his name in English. He visits as well at some point when he's, making his journey home. Various beings and people come to this place, so their fates are intertwined with Circe's. But Ayaya can also be a very, very dangerous place for a woman who is just there by herself. So Circe has to learn how to be independent, stand on her own feet, be able to defend herself, and that is something that the gods do not like about Circe whatsoever. And so Circe is left to kind of reflect if she feels like she belongs with the deities who she's technically born into or born to be a part of, she's a deity, or if she feels like she belongs with the mortals. And so Circe, I'm excited because it's supposed to be a little bit feminist as well, and I feel like we have to respect Circe. I don't know, this is a lot. We're gonna go with it anyway. Kind of matches my hair color, I'm not gonna lie. You and I are gonna get along, yeah. But that is adult, Greek mythology, fantasy, magic. Go figure. More magic. Then I have 3 books that are currently on their way to me right now because I was just in the mood to get some witchy books. So the first one we're gonna talk about is the Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. It's a very long title. And this book is by Segu Mendana. As far as I've gathered regarding this book, think like The House in the Cerulean Sea, but with witches instead. So we follow a girl who is actually a witch, but she is secretly a witch. She does, so she keeps her powers a secret, but she does, however, post videos online pretending to be a witch. I know, this is meta. But no one believes that she's a witch because they think she's just kidding. No one's taking it seriously until one day she receives a letter from this society. They belong to a place called Nowhere House, and they're like, you gotta come meet us because we know that you're a witch. So get on your way, get here right now. And she takes off. She takes off to go to this place where she meets several different people, all of whom are witches. There are also children at this place. She starts to feel very at home. There is a very annoying librarian who is very protective of the kids. They don't get along, but at the same time, he's very protective of the kids. And honestly, that's a very endearing quality, I'm not gonna lie. So there's a situation there as well. And our lead girl starts to find herself more and more at home along with, or among all the other witches at this house until one day someone comes knocking at the door and our lead girl finds herself wanting to protect this place because it's kind of become her family. So I'm thinking this is more of a vibes book and I'm so excited. I've been wanting to buy it for a month and then I just one day caved because it's so cute and the cover is so cute and I love it already and I'm super excited to be reading it. So it's gonna be a good fall cozy read. Vibes and witches, and it's so cute. Can I say cute? It's adorable. It's adorable. Then another one that I just got a notification for today, which is on its way, is Kingdom of the Feared by Carrie Maniscalco, which is actually the 3rd one in a series. I've not read the 3rd one yet. I feel like that should be implied. I don't have it yet, but I've read the other 2. And this is more of it's newer YA. It's been very hyped, turning into something a little bit more new adult in the 3rd one, I think, and also fantasy. So we follow 2 sisters, or we follow one of the sisters. I gotta watch out because I can only talk about the 1st one, but I just want to recap it for those of you who have not read it because I would highly recommend actually reading the first one. We follow our lead girl, whose name is Victoria, I think. Something like that. Something along those lines. I should really look into that before I start reading the third one, just to refresh my memory. But she has a twin, and they're both witches. Her twin sister, she feels, has been very private about certain things. Like, it feels a little bit like she's getting caught up in something that she's not supposed to. And lo and behold, one day she actually walks in on her body because her sister has been killed. And so our lead girl sets out on solving this murder mystery of like, who killed her sister, her twin sister. She's basically her other half, and she's distraught that she's found her dead. So she wants to figure out who the murderer is. And to help her with this whole murder mystery, she ends up tricking one of the 7 deadly sins into helping her, basically tying him to her. His name is Wrath. He's not super excited about the situation. Go figure. But our lead girl is basically like, I'll do what it takes. I need to figure out what happened to my sister. And as it turns out, there might be a little bit more than just a murder going on in this whole trilogy. So, yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. I'm so excited for the third one to get here. I am gonna maybe not read it here in October, but definitely November, I think. It's been a long time coming, so I'm very excited. And lastly, of the ones that I have purchased but haven't arrived yet, we have A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness, which I feel I might be the last person on the planet to read, but I'm doing it now, or at least when I get the time to, because physical TBRs, mine is quite big, so it might take a while to get there, but we'll get there eventually. But in this book we follow a woman who comes from a line of witches. She is a witch herself. She wants nothing to do with her powers though. One day while she is doing some research, she comes across a manuscript that she just kind of waves off. She puts it away, but unfortunately there are certain consequences to finding this manuscript, and all kinds of creatures start showing up in this library that she's doing research at, including vampires and demons, all different kinds of creatures from the underworld. It's basically going nuts. And so our lead woman decides to look into this manuscript a little bit better, and actually, or at least I think it's the manuscript. I'm not sure because I've not read the book. But as it turns out, she might actually have come across like a long lost treasure, and she's basically the only one who can break the spell of this treasure. And there's something about a very old vampire as well, but that's all I know. So don't want to know anymore, just know that these are very well-loved books. I'm super excited to be getting into the All Souls trilogy, finally. I don't know why, I just kept being like, I'm not interested, and then all of a sudden I was interested. So I jumped on it and ordered the first book. Then I got 2 books. One of them I don't really know that much about, but they're both on Kindle. I have them, not read them yet, want to read them so badly. The first one that we're going to talk about is Threadneedle by Carrie Thomas. And this book is about a girl who comes from a long line of binders that are people with magical powers, so they are witches, who think that magic is basically a sin. You're not supposed to use magic, so they bind their powers so that they can't. After her own parents were actually killed because of magic, she's been taught that it's a dangerous thing, it's dark and it's deadly, and she's not supposed to get anywhere near it. So she's looking very, very much forward to having her powers bound so that it's not something she has to think of. But as she starts to discover more of her city, she lives in London, but within London there is another city that is filled with magic. As she starts to discover a little bit more of that, but also learn more about her own magic from her grandmother, she slowly starts to rethink this whole binding her magic thing. So it sounds a little bit of like a self-discovery for a young witch, and I'm looking forward to it. It's young adult, as far as I remember, it's young adult. And also, since it takes place in London, it's also urban. Possibly also contemporary. I think it's a contemporary fantasy too, so. The other one that I have on my Kindle is The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow, which I have such a hard time talking about. I talked about it in my October TBR, but I can't really figure out what it's about, to be honest, other than it has historical fiction elements. So it takes place in the 1850s. We follow three sisters who are witches. Witches are still kept a secret, but there's a women's movement going on, and the sisters partake in this women's movement, and something about it also turns into a witches movement. But that is basically all I know. I'm super excited to get into it though. For some reason, I just get the feeling that this is like a good fall read, and it has to do with witches. It's a very well-loved book, so I wanted to include it in this video, even though I'm having issues kind of talking about it, because honestly, I don't know. This is going to be one of those books that I'm definitely going to be better at summarizing. A lot better at summarizing once I've read it, but I thought the whole women's movement thing and also the witches movement thing, like, combined in some way sounded very interesting, so I wanted to have a look at it. And lastly, we have 4 more books left that are vastly different from each other that I really wanted to include despite not owning them. 3 of them are out as of right now. 1 of them is not. It'll be out, I think, is it March next year? The first one, though, is The Year of the Witching by Alex Henderson. So what I've gathered about The Year of the Witching is that it's historical fiction with magic witches, but also, and ghosts too actually, but also it's a horror book. We follow a 16-year-old girl who lives in this kind of, I want to call it a community, but the Lance of Bethel. Let's call it the Lance of Bethel. Whatever exactly that is, I'm not entirely sure, but women in this community have to follow the Holy Protocol, which I'm not sure entirely what it's about, but I kind of have an idea. If you take into consideration that it's historical fiction, I kind of have a little bit of an idea of what it's about. Let's think like women have to be submissive, you know, that sort of thing. And due to her actually being the product of an affair her mother had with an outsider, someone from outside of Bethel, who was also of a different race than herself, our lead girl's whole existence is basically considered a sin among these people. And so our lead girl is doing her best to just keep a low profile, follow the protocol, just not get in trouble. But then one day she ends up in the forests that surround Bethel, where once upon a time 4 witches were actually hunted down and killed. Their spirits are still in this forest. They're still, what's the word for that? Haunting the forest? It might be haunting, let's just go with it. And our lead girl finds herself communicating with these witches, learning a lot about what's actually going on behind the scenes, if you will, in her little community. And she learns of the true horrors of what the church is doing to the people. And so actually sets out to basically want to end this whole thing. She wants to fight back. So I love a good feminist telling. I almost said retelling. I don't know why I said that. I love a good feminist story. I am sometimes a little bit scared about religion in books just because I'm not religious myself. It's not my favorite thing to listen, like to hear about. But I'm for some reason very, very drawn towards this book, so I'm looking forward to actually getting my hands on it eventually. Then we have one that I don't exactly know why, like I can't really put into words why I'm so drawn towards this book, but it's called Born at Midnight. It's by Cece Hunter. It's an early 2010s young adult paranormal, like think like vampires and witches, you know, the whole thing. And maybe it's nostalgia. Maybe it's nostalgia, but I'm very drawn towards it, so I will get my hands on this book eventually. Also, I just want to say that I'm saying, like, drawn towards it, nostalgia, as someone who wasn't the biggest fan of Twilight. I loved vampires before Twilight came out, though. Like, they've always been very fascinating, this whole concept of vampires to me, so I don't know, maybe that's why. Or is the whole, like, young adult, all like magical creatures, paranormal creatures going to school together. That's kind of speaking to me somehow. In this book though, we are not at a school, but we are at a camp. And this camp is a special place because, okay, first of all, we follow a young girl who went out to a party that ended up badly. So she's been shipped off to this camp by her mother because she's heard about this camp. It's a camp for troubled teens. As our lead girl shows up to the camp though, it turns out that it's not necessarily for troubled teens, but more like, think like supernatural creatures in all kinds of variants. Yes, all kinds of variants. Our lead girl does not necessarily feel at home there because why is she there? But she starts to learn some things about herself while she's staying at this camp. And there's also, and I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of love triangles, but I'm willing to give this one a shot. But there's a half-fae who is very interested in our lead girl, but there's also a werewolf who she's very interested in. So yeah, I don't know. It's like one of those, I wanna feel some nostalgia, so I'm so ready to for some reason just jump into this. I can't wait to get my hands on it eventually one day, but for now I'm gonna just hope that I can talk myself into buying it eventually. I don't know, like I genuinely, do you guys ever have that feeling with some books, like you know you're not necessarily gonna love it, you know that it's not written for you, but you're just like, I just really want to read this for some reason. That's that book for me right now. I'm very much tunnel visioning on it, but anyway, moving on. And then we also have a graphic novel which is called Over My Dead Body, and it's by Sweeney Boo. This book is about two sisters who attend an academy for magical, like, it's an academy of magic. They go there to learn magic. There are lots of witches at the school, so it's a very witchy book. But leading up to Halloween, or Samhain as they call it, that's actually the original name for Halloween, just a fact. But anyway, her sister goes missing, and everyone seems very unbothered by the fact that her sister has gone missing. They're like, no, we'll fix it, she'll come back, we'll start to look into it, but no one really does. So the sister herself decides to figure out what happened to her sister, and the more she looks into it, the more evidence is leading towards her having been lost in the forest that is surrounding this academy. And as it also happens, a year ago, another girl went missing in a very similar way. So I think it's young adult, I'm pretty sure it's young adult, but also a mystery and a graphic novel. I have not seen the drawings, but I saw that it was a little bit of a thicker graphic novel, which I think I'm gonna like. It's also very, very not a very well-known, like I came across it and I was just drawn to it instantly, but it seems like not a lot of people know about it, so figured it would be cool to include it in this video in case you're curious about a witchy graphic novel. And the last book that I want to talk about is one that's not been released yet, but it's called A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon, and it's by Sarah Hawley. And this book is for those of you who, just like me, love a good rom-com, but would also like one with like a touch of paranormal to it. So we follow a witch and a demon. So our witch is basically, she's not very in tune with her powers. She prefers to bake and do gardening. And then one day while she's baking, she's trying to summon or conjure up some flour, but it goes badly and ends up basically summoning a demon instead. More specifically, she has summoned a very powerful demon, a legend among his people, demon people, to perform a soul bargain. Unfortunately, he doesn't want to leave her because his reputation has taken a bit of a hit back home, so he's like, we gotta do this soul bargaining thing. She doesn't want to let go of her soul, go figure. So they're kind of stuck with each other and end up moving in together. He becomes her roommate, and to avoid getting questions from her mother, they start to fake date. It sounds chaotic. I am here for it. We got some forced proximity. We have some fake dating. We got limited time as well because he has to go back home to his demon realm or wherever they belong. I don't know. And I thought it sounded so funny. I thought it sounded hilarious. I need a rom-com with some paranormal vibes. So I was so happy when I found this and I wanted to share it with you. But that's all I got for you guys today. So I think this video also turned out way too long because I don't know how to stop talking. If you want to check out the books, like I said, they're all linked in the description box. You can find both links to Amazon, but also Book Depository. Maybe not for A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating, because it's not out yet, but I'll do my best. If you've read any of the books, definitely share your thoughts down below. I'd love to hear you out. Feel free to share your opinions with me and everyone else. But if you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up, and if you enjoyed it, you want to see more videos like this from me, but also TBR videos, wrap-ups, bookish unboxings, readathons, and you know, all the booktube stuff, definitely consider hitting the subscribe button. But that's all I got for you guys today, so I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. Oh, you know you're beautiful.